Have you ever wondered why our world looks so, well, uneven? Why some places seem to have so much, while others are really struggling? Today, we're going to try and piece together the puzzle of global inequality. So let's jump right in. This is it. This is the big question, right? And the reason it's so tricky to answer is because there's no single easy cause. It's not just one thing.
Exactly. The best way to think about this whole thing is like a giant, really complicated puzzle. You've got all these different pieces, some from the physical world, some from deep in the past, and some from our modern economy, and they all lock together to create the world we see today.
So to figure this puzzle out, we're going to look at it in three parts. First, we'll dive into what I'm calling the Earth's lottery, the physical stuff. Then we'll listen for the echoes of the past. And finally, we'll follow the flow of money in our world today.
Okay, first up, the Earth's lottery. This is all about the hand a country is dealt by nature. These are the absolute foundational pieces of the puzzle that pretty much everything else gets built on top of.
Let's start with something as basic as the climate. If you're in a country with a moderate climate, where it's easy to grow food, you can build a stable food supply. That means you have extra to sell, which brings in money. But if you're a nation dealing with extreme heat or constant drought, you're starting way behind, struggling to feed your people, let alone build an economy on farming. And next, think about what's literally under the ground. Some countries just hit the jackpot. They have tons of valuable stuff like oil or minerals. They can generate a massive income just by selling those resources. But if you don't have those, well, that's one major path to wealth that's just not available to you.
And finally, there are natural disasters. A huge earthquake, a devastating hurricane. These things can wipe out years, even decades of progress in just a few hours. All that money that was supposed to go to new schools or better hospitals, suddenly, it all has to be rerouted to just rebuilding what was lost. It's this brutal cycle of one step forward, two steps back.
But the physical world is really only part of the story. Now we've got to turn to the echoes of the past, because, believe me, history casts a very, very long shadow.
A massive piece of this historical puzzle is colonialism. For centuries, European powers controlled huge parts of the world, and during that time, the main goal was often just to take resources and wealth out of those territories for their own benefit. For example, they might build a railway, but it would go from a mine straight to a port, not to connect the people within the country. So when these nations finally became independent, they were starting from a huge economic disadvantage.
This quote really just hits the nail on the head. The whole system was based on taking wealth out while putting very little back in to build up the local schools, hospitals, or institutions that a strong economy needs.
And another echo from the past, and unfortunately from the present too, is conflict. Things like civil wars and political chaos don't just cause unbelievable suffering. They are absolutely catastrophic for development. They destroy roads and buildings, they scare away investors, and they force governments to spend money on the military instead of on things like healthcare and education.
All right, so for our final set of puzzle pieces, let's look at the modern economic systems that control how money moves around the world today. A huge engine for growth is international trade. Being able to sell what you make to the global market, that's one of the quickest ways for a country to build wealth. In our totally interconnected world, strong trade links are absolutely vital.
But here's the catch. Not every country has the same access to these big global markets. If a nation is kind of cut off, maybe because of its location or politics, or just not having the right ports and roads, it's going to really struggle to generate that income. And that slows everything else down. Debt is another enormous economic piece of the puzzle. A lot of developing countries borrow money for big projects, but when that debt gets too big, well, look at this. A huge chunk of the country's entire budget, in this case 40%, is going just to pay back loans. That's money that can't go to hospitals or schools or better roads. It just squeezes the budget for everything else.
Okay, so we've looked at the physical pieces, the historical pieces, and the economic pieces. Now it's time to step back and see how they all lock together to create the full picture.
And this is the real key. These things don't just happen on their own in a vacuum. A history of colonialism can leave a country with a lot of debt and weak trade links. That economic weakness makes it way harder to prepare for or rebuild from a natural disaster. It's a chain reaction, a reinforcing cycle that can be incredibly hard to break.
So what we're really looking at here isn't one problem that has one simple fix. It's this super complex web of challenges that are all tied together. To really get why our world is so unequal, you have to see how geography and history and economics are all tangled up with each other.
And that leaves us with one last thought. Once you see all these different pieces, and more importantly, how they connect, it really changes how you see the puzzle itself, doesn't it? It pushes us past the simple answers and helps us appreciate all the different forces that have shaped our world. Thanks so much for joining me.